So last time, if I remember correctly, we ended up with just finishing off the pay distribution part of the system. We talked about pay controls, related payroll controls, filing statuses, employee rates, effective dates. Does that all sound familiar to you?
Yes.
I don't think we did a lot in the job area, though. I think we got to that, and I think you had to leave at 3:30.
Yes.
And so I think we really didn't heavily cover jobs, which obviously is a crucial part of the system. Did we go through, I think we did go through the payroll jobs, though, in a previous session, didn't we? Went through kind of the master table, right. So as I look at Tracy Plew, I guess, I'm not sure how you pronounce that last name, I can click on her jobs, and of course it shows down here 7 jobs, but, that's a lot of jobs, actually. So as I clicked it, I kind of immediately noticed that it didn't quite look right to me, and I'll tell you what looks off to me. Is that normally the system defaults, you can actually see it here, it's defaulting for this employee where jobs are not blocked. Typically during the roll process every year, the jobs for the previous year are blocked. And the reason they're blocked is that we have no intention of using them any longer. And you can see here that all these jobs, well, again, this job here is even a funkier job because you can see that date is already passed. So normally I wouldn't see a screen like this. This job would have been blocked. So let's just kind of do a little bit of that. I'm just going to go in and hit the block button. And probably payroll dates overlap with the same employee job dated. I don't know what that means.
Oh, go back.
Yeah.
Right. You have 2 in a row, miscellaneous and no retire.
They were probably getting paid for a bonus or something with no retirement in it, maybe.
Yeah, but that's fine. But all I'm doing is blocking a job. This is a new message that I don't know. Well, maybe I was no. Yeah, somebody is. Every time I use this system, I get a little frustrated. Somebody's putting some type of check in there. This is new. And it's actually not correct, and it's getting us a problem. I can't even block this job. So I don't know, Bill. I mean, I hate to, every time we do training, I don't know what to do except to tell you we got a problem here. So if you can maybe make a note.
Hold on 1 second. Let me get. All right, so we're on.
I mean, I understand.
Job card.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, we could probably correct it. Let's just kind of look and see what they're basically saying. And you guys saw it, right? Because you saw that these jobs overlay each other. So this one here doesn't have any activity. It's never had any activity. This one's had some activity. And I'm in the test system, by the way. So I can go ahead and just delete that job. That job shouldn't be here. You shouldn't have the job overlay. That's just an insert in the middle of these dates, right? So if I delete this record, which it should just allow me to delete it, and then I go to this job I'm trying to block, it should block it fine. Maybe not. 819 to 830. 819 to 830. Let's go ahead and get rid of this. It's this job here. Is this no retire job? Yes.
No, because it was 8/30 of 2015.
Well, but again, it's this job right here, don't you think? Because it's the same. Well, let's say I just filter it like this. That's a better way to see it. So actually, all of these jobs really are overlapping. That's overlapping that job. This job is completely inside of, well, it's just somebody's messed up. I don't know where these jobs are coming from. But I'm going to go ahead and just delete this job just for the fun of it, just to see this work. This job has activity, clearly, plenty of activity. This one has activity. This one, you see, the part of the problem is that this job really should stop one date before this job. So let's just change this end date to okay. Whoops, I guess I meant 818, sorry. Yeah, I'm not sure how this data got this way. So that one doesn't overlap. This one doesn't have to overlap. And that would be it, right? So in theory, I should be able to go back to, let me go back now to the screen I was at. I'm just going to close this and open it back up. All right, so this job should be blocked. It's past us. It's not the current job, so I should be able to just go up and block it. Should just be fine. There we go. This one is still active. Okay, that's the way it should look right there, I guess. I don't know what no retirement is, quite honestly, so I can't really even explain that one to you. But we'll go ahead and talk at least about the teacher job and the miscellaneous job. So when the system defaults, and I'll kind of close this window up, when you bring up the jobs, what it'll initially bring up is jobs that are not blocked. You can show blocked jobs, just click on this button, it'll show the blocked jobs, you can hide them right back. So this button they were put here just a simple way instead of having to mess with the filters. All it's doing is just making the filter command. So when I say show blocked, it's just changing that filter just for that employee. One thing to note, Brenda, is that this is a great screen where you can show a bunch of hidden columns which are related to the employee itself. Then you can break the filters, set other filters, and all of a sudden have a very nice kind of data set in front of you that you can then send to Excel and further analyze. So a lot of people like to do that, particularly at year end when they're analyzing which jobs are going to roll. One of the major features that we need to show you is how to roll the jobs. And so every year, kind of, as you would expect, jobs are, since they have a start date and end date, you need to create new jobs for the next year. They typically would start no earlier than the end date of the previous year. So therein lies kind of why we had that screen popping up and giving us that problem. So I guess, Bill, what it's doing is that it's not analyzing the job we were on. It's looking at all the jobs for that employee, seeing an overlap, and sort of saying you can't do anything until you resolve this issue. So I'm just not sure who introduced that, if that was the intention. So that's something that maybe we have to think about, what work order that was done and what was the purpose of the work order. I kind of would have written it probably in a way that it would only analyze all the jobs of the same payroll job of the one I'm actually working on. I wouldn't look at all of them necessarily, So I think that's the difference of why that message was coming up. So anyway, so the jobs that are marked active, well, the jobs that have that active flag could only be generally one row, and it will be the job that, based on your work date as well as based on the default job in the employee master record. If you remember in the K-12E tab, FAST tab on the employee card, we had a default job. And what you also can do, you can do it from here as well, you can make the job primary. So I can click on here and make the job primary. Now if I do that, it doesn't need to do that because it's already the default job. But all this code is really doing, and it's really good to do when you're initially putting a new employee in, you're putting their initial job in, you click this, and all that really does is it updates the employee's card with this value as their default job. You must have a default job for that employee to become valid for processing payroll. No payroll can be processed unless you have a default job or primary job. They can have secondary jobs, but they have to have they have to have one primary job. You can't have more than one.
So is this like their contracted job? This is what you're going to pull in for payroll?
Well, jobs are of three types there, and you can see this column right here, pay type, of salary, hourly, and per diem. So
Okay.
salary and per diem are transacted in through the time journal or the timesheet system and so forth. So they kind of are transactionally they're variable pay basically. So they're coming in from some other front end process. The
Okay.
salary jobs, if it's marked salary, if it's not blocked, and if the payroll start date and payroll end date are falling, if you will, on both sides of the proposed check date that you're processing when you're processing the payroll, then it will drop in as long as the employee, in addition, is not blocked. So the employee has to be non-blocked. The job has to be not blocked. The job start date and end date have to be on the both sides, if you will, of the check date. Then it will just drop in. However, there are some caveats here, and one of the caveats is that they actually have dollars left in their contract. So if they don't have dollars left on their contract, but only if the earnings code that's connected to it is programmed that way, it's set up that way. But when it is, then the system will automatically stop if there's not enough dollars in that contract. So let me kind of double click this one now. You don't data enter anything here. You do have a lot of fields that you can actually see on this screen. But some of these fields are also in the statistics box. So we've kind of over the years, we didn't have the statistics box at first, but when the newer version came out, Nav gave us a great ability to do those statistics box. So we have this job fact box now that we've worked on from time to time. Hopefully it's right. And what it's doing is it's kind of feeding off of data from the job, but it's also down here, earned versus paid. It's actually looking based on the person's calendar, and we'll talk about calendar. I think we talked about it already, but the calendar for that employees for that job, it's looking based on the workday, today's date, the 21st of January, based on holidays and so forth and so on, and computing, well, how many days in the contract, based on the calendar, are considered to be worked as of this time. Then the system has a daily rate. It's multiplying that together, and it's basically saying that they've earned $37,000. Now we've only paid them $24,000 because we're paying, I guess at a slower rate than they're earning. And it makes sense because this is probably maybe being paid out in 12 months, but yet they're earning it in 10 months. So they're always ahead, if you will, of what they've earned versus what they've paid. Because they don't earn anything during the summer. They've already worked the class if they're a 10-month employee. So that's kind of all this data is showing here. So if I double click, let's bring up the job, and the job has 3 tabs. Actually, it has 4 tabs on it. I lied. I forgot about this GL allocation tab. So it has the general tab, more of a pay-related tab. The GL allocation, which is just view only, and I'll show you what I mean by that in a second, and then some other stuff. But let's work through each tab successfully. And again, this is the same screen as this. File attachments, all the same. So this is going to be exactly the same. Any of these options that are in blue, by the way, are drillable. So the stuff that would not be logically drillable, because I can't drill a daily rate, you're not going to see it in blue. Okay. So in here, the job, obviously, it's the job that comes in through as you're entering it in. Can you change the job? You can change the job. The system will pop up most likely a message. It'll certainly pop up a message if you change the start date. It will say, do you want to update the default values with the change you're making? And what that really means is that when you normally have a brand new job and you put in the job code and the date, it brings in all the default values, if you will, from the the payroll job, the master setup basically. Well, sometimes you override some of that stuff. Let's say the default is you're going to work 196 days, but this person is, let's say they started mid-year and they're going to work 125 days, and you've changed it to 125 days. Well, if you say yes to that question for whatever reason, let's say the payroll start date was not X but Y, and you change it, it'll ask you, do you want to get the values back from the master record? If you say yes, then it'll obliterate that and put it back to the way it will look like from the payroll master record. If you say no, then it won't do that. So you have sort of that option, and sometimes you just want to say no because you want to not have it overridden, but you just want to change the date. And then again, change the date, you'll pop up about, if I change this to the 18th, it'll pop up there, and there's the question, do you wish to default values from the payroll job? I'll say no, and then if I close this, it'll say, do you want to rename the record? Because this is part of the primary key, these first 2 fields. I'm going to say no. And nothing changed, so that was a false change. But anyway, I just wanted to show you kind of what that looks like. Okay, so payroll start date, payroll end date. So the important thing also, Brett, to understand is that this is not necessarily the first day of work and it's not the last day of work. If the district is interested in that, then that's what the contract start date and contract end date are really for and what they really mean. We don't really have functionality surrounding that very much, those 2 fields, the contract start date and contract end date, but you are able to manipulate them when you roll the jobs each year. So as I rolled teachers' jobs this year, I could say next year's contracts, the first day of, where they actually are responsible for being at the district, which might not be the first day of classes, by the way. It may be 4 days before that or whatever, versus the last day. And that may not be the end of classes. It may be 2 days after that. But this is, again, in the typical contract language, they typically have a start date and end date. That's not the same thing as the payroll start date and payroll end date, because payroll processes on a frequency that's not absolutely married to when they work. It's just the way payroll works. So when you're thinking about payroll start date and end dates, you really have to think about your pay cycles and your check dates. And you have to understand what date ranges you're putting in here will be compared to, as I said before, the check date. And as long as you think about check dates when constructing what payroll start dates and end dates make sense, you'll be fine. As soon as you get too much muddled into the literal start date of when their contract literally begins and ends, you're going to have a problem. Not always, but you might have a problem. You may put it too restrictive or too wide, whatever. So typically, it's not a problem to figure out, but it's just something to think about. And again, this person put 8/19/14, but that's kind of funky. If you knew, for instance, that the first payroll that this person got paid on would have been the 9/3 payroll, you could have just put 9/1 and it would have just been just as effective. But if you knew that you were going to run one more cycle in the summertime, and you didn't want this contract to be concluded in that payroll, and let's say the check date was going to be 8/20, you got a problem on your hands. You see, so you have to really think about when checks are being run. And it's not just the pay cycle end dates, because you know how sometimes they change the lag in terms of when the actual check date will be out. When you set up pay cycles, you indicate exactly the check dates, and it's those check dates you should be thinking about when advising clients on how to construct these payroll start dates and end dates, in my opinion. So, and that's been, once I think everybody understood that, I think it became much easier to understand what to put there. I think day one, Linda on our side was putting dates that were more contract oriented. Okay, so the next field is the earnings code. That earnings code comes in from the payroll job. Earned Consal has kind of been our universal one for earnings that are going to be managed and stopped automatically when they finish their contract. That's kind of the universal sort of meaning of Earned Consal. And the way that gets done, I'm going to kind of cheat a little bit and go to the payroll control steps, which we're going to learn in more detail probably in a later session. But Earned Consal has its calc method, steps, and it's basically just two steps. Amount is the job rate, which we're going to discuss, the pay period rate basically, and then this limit part, this is the one I wanted to show you, is amount is limited by employee job contract. So that's what's going to automatically say, let's go ahead and figure out how much total contract amount, how much has been paid to date, how much are we trying to pay this person, and let's make sure that we don't pay any more than a penny, if you will, not a penny more than the contract. So that's kind of how that works. And so as long as Earned Consal has that step in it, and as long as you assign Earned Consal to this job, then it is now a contract controlled, it's truly controlled dollar-wise. So often, things like maybe the coaching jobs and so forth aren't following that same construct because they're paid in different ways and so forth. So we'll talk about that. The position number is a field that doesn't get inputted, it gets referred to, and it would be only usable if you're using the position control system, which we did a training on earlier today. But so that would just show what position has been assigned to this teacher to this job, because the data is held somewhere else. We're just kind of looking back at that data here. That's why it's not there. So normally you just would see the value, you could click it, and you would bring up the position. The allocation. So let's talk about allocation then quite a bit. Allocation. I'll open up this guy right here. So this guy here is showing me the allocation, okay, in an allocation string format, allocation account name, which is the name related to the account string, and then a percent. So that's what that's showing me. But what it's actually really truly connected to is this code here, this allocation, which was assigned automatically, and then somebody put the codes in. So one thing to show you is that we've got a couple of buttons up here, and it's really these two buttons right here I want to point your eyes to. One thing is create new allocations. So when you set up a new job for a new employee, and we can set up, once I finish all this, we'll go ahead and set up a new job for this employee. When I click that button called Create New Allocation, the system has two methodologies based on payroll setup to determine how it comes up with this little code here. And the answer is that it's either going to be an automatic just pull from the next number series, which is what this one's doing, or it could be constructed based on a combination of the employee's number, which in this case is TP3071, with a hyphen and the payroll job number of teacher. And that's fine for the most part because the allocation number is a 20-character field, and that construction generally works. We've had problems with it when they have very long job names and long employee numbers. So then the other methodology is there that just pull the next number in the series. And so it doesn't matter to us which one. The reason sometimes people like the smart number is they could look at the allocation later on and know that's, TP3071, and that's Tracy, and so forth. If I click on this, though, I think the system actually put the teacher's name and put the job title in there. So you can see what it did in terms of the description when somebody clicked this button. But what they did is they clicked this button, it immediately created this number and opened this screen right here. And this screen is very unwieldy right now, so I'm going to go ahead and clean it up for myself. I think I'm going to take the Dimension Speed key off. And I think, hold on, okay. Now, do you normally use to see the font in front, Brenda?
Yes.
All right, so I'll probably make that change too. Let's just do that. The ASN, notice I actually can't remove it, actually. Well, it looks like I can remove it, but I don't think I really can remove it. Because what happens is one of those fields that's going to show up automatically whether you have ASNs or not. You guys aren't using ASNs in Ohio, but Maryland, we know Maryland's using it. We know a district in PA uses it, so we just had that conversation today, actually. Anyway, so you can see here we really are just seeing it in its more componentized way. On that other screen, you kind of see it together, as an account string. It's all fake on the other screen. This is the real thing. This is what really counts. On an allocation, have we gone through allocations before?
No.
Okay, so let me explain a couple things about this screen. There's probably, maybe 7 things I should point out, maybe 8. One is that you have up to 3 styles: fixed percent, fixed amount, and combination. Combination is one that we do not support at this time for payroll. It's usable in AP. And allocations, by the way, can be used for payroll and AP. So you can have allocations set up and being used on the payable side. But on the payroll side, we only support fixed percent and fixed amount. We are studying the ability to accommodate combination. Combination would be something like this. Put a fixed amount of the person's salary in this account string and put the balance to this percent. Like 100, then put 100% to this. So it'd be kind of like almost like, how direct deposit works, where I want fixed amount to my savings, balance to checking. That's what combination would be. So we at this point do not support that. So if people pick combination, they will get errors later on in payroll processing that will tell them.
But you can still do 50-50. You can do percentage to jobs.
Yes, or you can do amounts. So if you do amounts are very particular because what you'd have to do is, I'm going to kind of close the screen for a split second, and I'm going to open up the pay part of this. Well, actually, you can see it right there. You see the 308.20? Then in that scenario, it would be 100% required that your amounts here, if I did switch this to amounts and entered them in as amounts, then you would put those amounts in. And I'm not seeing the amounts in. And I guess somebody removed it from the screen, so let's just kind of put it back in.
I think you chose percentage on your screen there.
No, but my point is that usually we have both showing, and it just depends. If I switch this to an amount, then I can say fixed amount, and normally we would expect you to come in here and put in, $500 to this, and I'll just pick the exact same account string because I'm too lazy to figure out anything else. And I'll do, 3,000 to that. And again, my total, if I hit F5 now, you see the total shifting. See how it's shifting?
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is that if this doesn't agree to that number right there, the 301,820, I believe it'll let you close this screen, which is also kind of not great. Yeah, it lets you close the screen, but during payroll processing, you'll get all kinds of errors because it has to be perfect, because how else would we know what to do? The combination could be better because you can say fixed amount to $500 and the balance, 100% here. You know what I mean? I could do that. And if I do that, I don't know what it'll do. Yes, it accepts anything. But I think what it does is in this it's going to ignore that. So I'm going to go ahead and not mess up the whole system here. Okay. I'm just going to set the date up the way I know it should be. And I'm going to hit F5 and then see everything looks good. Okay. All right. So I just want to show you that that's one thing to know, is how to understand how to use fixed percentage versus fixed amounts. Not a fan of fixed amounts. You should not be a fan of fixed amounts. And you should discourage the client. If the client says, if they whine at you and say, well, but I want a certain amount to go, blah, blah. Well, look, if you know it's a salaried employee, you know how much it is, can't you just back into some percentages? I mean, you can put, some small percentages in here. I can put 16.52%, and so why can't you just convert to a percent and call it a day? Because then when the person goes up in salary, at least you're close, and you don't have to do as much management of the process. I mean, fixed amounts, now again, I think the combination I can more understand, but I don't support that. We don't support that yet, so, Okay, so that's that. One thing to note is if they come to you and they say, I want to be able to, I need to change this. So for this woman, I'm changing it to another number. I'm being a different account string. Sorry, I'm not talking straight right now. And I want to make it effective the 2nd of February. So you have a couple choices. You could go ahead and just simply blank it out on that other screen. In other words, I could just come in here. I could blank this guy out right here, and then just once it's blanked out, hit create new allocation and set up a new one. But maybe it's kind of close to the old one, and maybe I don't want to do that. So you have another option, which is under the navigate section. Maybe not. Where is it? Do you see a copy? No, where is the copy? See, I think it's on the list screen. Yeah. So you can't do it this screen. This is the card screen. Where you have to get to it is you have to do this and go to advanced. There you go. So now I'm on it, and you see I'm on her. See how she has a teacher one and a supplemental one? This is her teacher one. I could go copy 0201. Okay, and then click it and go here, and I can go edit that. And I can say, no, the instructional level needs to be, preschool. We're doing her preschool now. That kind of thing. Okay. And hit OK, and then it's done. So the question then is, what does the system do relative to bringing it up? So that's one of the things that it's a little tricky. So if I hit cancel now and click this button, it's bringing up the 215. I guess it brings up I think we programmed it to bring the latest one up because we figured you'd want to bring up the latest one. So even though I'm not on 2115, it's smart enough to say, well, you probably want to go to the most recent one. So that's just something to be aware. If you really wanted to go back to the old one, then you would have to do more like this and more advanced and then go to the correct one. So, because this button here is just kind of like a cheater button. You know what I mean? We're kind of doing a lot of code behind the scenes to try to figure out which one you probably want to bring up. Because it is kind of interesting that these things you can have the same number with different effective dates. So it's a slight nuance. Not sure everybody uses it that way. I think what most people do is they just come to the same old one and they just change it. That's kind of thing what they do. So that's another nuance. So I told you about 8 things. I've given you about 7 of them now. The last one I want to tell you is this test allocation. So the test allocation basically is looking for the combination of this guy. And so I think this was, 11? Is that what it was before? Let's see if this works. Yeah, so I don't really know why this is not being set up in the validator table. But basically what it's doing is it's looking to see if there's a valid account string. And again, the way the system is, the system will auto-create the record if you're in the auto-create mode. It will give you an error if it's not. So that's kind of what the purpose of this was, is to say to the operator, is this a valid combination that we've already kind of expected? From
all that test was just tested what you just did.
Yeah, it just tests to see, do I find a validator record, an account string? this message could be, what do you think, Bill? Bill, why don't you unmute for 2 seconds? Remember we on the last training we did or whatever we discovered on the GL account card, we kind of called it validator or something.
Yeah, we changed it. We changed it from validator.
Right, because we're trying to refer to it as the account strings. So I think probably here on this message here, do you think it would be, and I guess I look to you, Brenda, or Roxanne, because I know she's listening as well, should it say GL account string, cannot be found? The system will auto-create the GL account string record the first time this allocation is used. And I put in parentheses, if you're in the create mode, because if you're in the validate mode, it's going to actually return an error. So I just think this message is a little bit we don't like to use the word validator because that's our older terminology. So this message, Bill, is coming up from the test allocation button on the allocation card, on the line allocation card. There's a test allocation button in which the message, I think, should be improved. Not a high priority item, but I think it's one of those things that we really should take care of.
So is that saying there's a problem with that account?
Yes, it's saying that if I go right now to our account strings and filter for that exact combination, I will not find it.
So, but normally if you hit that test allocation, it'll say it's okay, and
it'll say it's valid. It'll say it's okay.
And then you just hit okay. Okay.
Yeah. It passes. It's sort of like the budget check. It passes.
Okay.
Doesn't give you any more information to say it passes. Yeah.
But it might be, you might be right, Andrew, though. It might be more efficient to have it as the accounting string because that's actually what the error is on.
Well, and that's where we want them to go.
Yeah.
Well, again, I'm afraid they won't know where to go because the validator is kind of a process, but it's not a place. It was a place as well, but we've expanded it now and refer to it now as the GL account string, as what we call it. So from a usability perspective, that's where we're trying to direct them to. And I think this message could be improved in general. I don't know what it says if it actually does find it. Let me just kind of go to another job, just a miscellaneous job here, and I can just go ahead and where do I say navigate? Yeah, here we go. Maybe not. How about this one? There we go. There we go.
Okay.
So I don't mind that. That message I can live with, right? That message
Yeah.
is fine. I don't need to change that one. I just don't like the other one. All right, so I think I've beaten a dead horse at this point, in terms of the allocation. But you obviously have to have an allocation. Anything you're seeing here will be updated here. So if I were to go in there and change, well, actually, that's interesting. See how that's saying 16?
Mm-hmm.
Remember I said to you it's going in, it's probably here using the work date. I'm just kind of curious, just in my own knowledge of the system. I'm going to go ahead and change my work date now to 0201, and I'm going back to that same employee, I think. Yeah, here she is. See how it changed? So what the system is doing is pulling the allocation, because I have two of them there, based on my work date. And that's probably an appropriate thing to do, but that was a little bit of a discrepancy because when I clicked here, remember it was bringing up, now it is bringing up 11, but it was bringing up 11 last time. But here it was showing 16, which was the older allocation, because I was still not at 2.1 yet. You know what I mean? So I'm just trying to make a point that there's a slight nuance there. But anyway, so this is just interactively pulling that same data, and we'll just kind of continue on. So, all right, so let's talk about other fields here. So the calendar code comes in from the payroll job. The customized calendar is no unless it's yes, and it's yes because either a docking process updated it or somebody updated it manually here. What we think about when we think about calendars, if you remember last time, is we defined the first day of school, the last day of school, all the holidays, where the school is closed for vacation, not vacation, but holidays and weekends and so forth, are removed. The system then computes. So if I kind of click on here and click on advanced, I see this job, and if I click on edit, I see it's 185 days. It starts on that date, ends on that date. Again, not to be mixed up with payroll start dates, but rather just in general. And I can click here, do a control home. There's 8/19. Gets to the first Friday. We're off on the 22nd. Not sure why. That's why I like to have descriptions. I mean, I would never put a description on a weekend, but any weekday I would have a description on it personally to know why it's off. Friday. We're off again Friday. Good God, these guys never work. And there's Labor Day. I'm just not sure why they're off those Fridays. You know what I mean? It's kind of funky. Whatever, you get the idea. So that's the calendar. If I have a customized calendar for this employee, then you will see a yes there. If you want to customize their calendar, you actually click the no. I don't think there's any other way to do it at all. There isn't. This is it. Your only way to get to it is to click this button, and then it opens it up. And now you're in the customized version of this, which means that it's kind of like a layered approach where you have the base calendar and now we have specific stuff. And we actually use the source of base. If I try to unclick this, you cannot do this because it's already been declared non-working in the base calendar. So I'll hit F5 and abandon that. But so let's just say I go to the 28th. And I don't think right now our leave system doesn't automatically update this. One thing to understand that if the teacher has 3 personal days or whatever personal days and they're using a personal day, that's not a date or a day that gets updated on this calendar. This calendar is only really generally used for 3 scenarios. One is that they started mid-year. Another one is that they left mid-year. And the third one is they took more leave than they were allowed, leave without pay, if you will. Those are the 3 scenarios that that give you the reason to update the calendar. One thing that you can do is in here there's an action. I thought there was another action where I could actually, oh yeah, here it is, create non-work days. So if the person's gone for an extended period of time, you do have the ability to kind of go, okay, they were out for, I'm just going to go ahead and do it, for 02/02/15 to 02/06/15, and I'll just say it was a bad week. And I'm not sure what this locked calendar is. I know it's been there for a while, but I just don't remember, so I'm not going to pretend I know. And that's what it does. Now later on, if you go, you know what, that was stupid, she really was here on that Friday, I just click that off, and then that's simply as simple as that. It's a visual representation. The data is actually really maintained here, and that's where it's maintained. So in some sense, I could actually do it right here manually. I could go ahead and, for instance, remove this record and then close this screen, and graphically, if I hit F5, it'll disappear. So this is kind of just a graphical representation. All we really are saving in this example is just 3 custom records. So it's kind of like a sleight of hand. It's kind of like, it's not that we really are retaining the days that they're working. We're just retaining very minimal information to express it. It's kind of an interesting concept. So, and you can see what level this comes through. If I hit OK now, this will be a yes. It's not yes now because, again, that F5 business. The screen hasn't refreshed. I'm going to hit F5. It now says yes. So generally speaking, you click that again, and you can come there and scroll up and down and so forth. The system does generally bring this screen up into, with today. So today is what, the 21st, so it's kind of close to today is what it ends up doing. So it's kind of, sometimes we want to go to the beginning of the year, end of the year, but you have to just click somewhere, Control End, Control Home, however, page up, page down, and so forth. So that's pretty much how that works. We do have snow day capabilities at the base level, so you can use a snow day to take that day out of the entire calendar, and so forth. Generally, it's not the snow day, but if they're extending the calendar because of snow days. The superintendent said there's too many snow days, and we're adding one more day at the end of the year. That's extending a base calendar. If anybody has any days off already marked off on the end of it, then the system will, I think, automatically ask you a question and then automatically remove it. There's no reason to give the person the penalty of a day off if the district ends up being closed or open, vice versa. So that's sort of the calendaring side of the system. When you click on this button, by the way, this number of days worked does adjust. So if I click on this and say, okay, 182, and I think if I come up here and hit F5, it's 181 now. And if I put it back and F5 again, it's 182. Okay? So at the end of the year, the nice part about this is that you can report you can report how many days they actually worked. One thing also I was just thinking about this is if the 3 scenarios I told you is a leave without pay, beginning and ending. In other words, they started mid-year, they ended mid-year. In the termination program, there's a question it asks. It says, do you want to update the calendar? And if you say yes, it will automatically create the rest of the calendar being, in essence, not worked. So it'll take care of that automatically. There really is nothing in a mid-year hire. That's why we put this guy here. So this is the design here would be you would pick up the start of the calendar, 8/19/14, and you would pick one day before their start date, if that makes any sense to you. But we're not automating that process. This is the process to do that. So if you want to take out the day's work because they're a mid-year hire, let's say a teacher left because they were sick or whatever, and you had to hire a brand new teacher, you really should shorten their calendar to the amount of days worked. Otherwise, this whole calculation will start to fall apart because it can't figure out the days worked and all that kind of stuff. It comes up, it acts like they were getting credit for days worked that they weren't even hired.
Okay.
So that's important. And again, that's something to play with. You can always play offline with these test databases and kind of sample that. Sample an onboarding process, offboarding process, perfect your procedures, so forth and so on. I'm going to forget lock calendar because I just can't remember that. If you ask me to look that up, I'll look it up. I'm just not sure what that has to do with. Full-time equivalent. So we have that flow field, remember, at the higher level called full-time equivalent jobs, and it's summing up all the non-block jobs full-time equivalents. So in this example here, normally you would have a 1 in here, and the system would be adding up that 1 for all non-block jobs. So then if I had 2 jobs and they were 0.4 and 0.4, and they're both non-block, then the system would perceive at the total employee level that they have a 0.8 FTE. And again, that applies whether it's an hourly job, per diem job, theoretically, although it's generally you never see FTEs assigned to a per diem job, but hourly jobs and certainly salary jobs you do. Why they're not using that here, I don't know. The blocked field, very important. If you block them, they will not process. So if you went ahead and blocked a salary job, it's just not going to process. End of story. So it's real important. You can have the employee non-blocked, but if the job's blocked, it's blocked. We try to block them automatically during the roll period. And again, if you don't want to do that, you don't have to do that. There is a periodic activity to go out and block en masse all jobs of a certain date range. So that's one thing that they could do at Perkins, and since it looks like they have a lot of jobs that should be blocked that aren't blocked, you could study and practice and probably run the periodic task to block all the jobs that are in the past. They should have no jobs that are not active any longer unblocked. It's just not a good move, in my opinion. Payroll activity code is used in different states for different things. I know we use it in North Carolina for some things that I don't even understand myself. I don't know if this lookup even looks into anything. It probably doesn't. Oh, it does. I don't know if this is applicable, though. Do you know anything about this? Are these Ohio codes? Maybe they are. I don't know, Brett. You're going to have to. I'm just not sure because I don't see it filled in on this particular person, so I'm not sure what its use would be.
Yeah, I don't know what that use would be.
Yeah, so you may want to find out. I'm not sure because we also have the assignment area, the EMIS assignment area. Contract start date and end we've talked about. Now, this area here, I don't know, Roxanne, do you know much about how these fields work these days? Roxanne, you there? Maybe she walked away. The substitute job, I guess, is this a substitute job? Is that what this is? I'm not sure. I'm not. Christina, you know? I see you're on. Roxanne, Christina, anybody there? I'm not sure. That we added a bunch of stuff in there. Let's just take a look at some of the choices. I don't know what that is. Term, unspecified, as needed, short-term, long-term, and there's spaces in there that shouldn't be there. Job term, job type filter. I guess what I'd like to do, Brett, is skip this because I don't understand myself.
Okay.
Go to a separate training session, and maybe Bill, I'm just not sure, if any of us have been explained what these fields are for. So it's just something that you may want to bring up with Debbie. I don't know. I mean, they've built, Kevin and her have built some stuff, but I'm just not sure exactly what it's used for. So I'll just leave it at that. All right, let's close this screen. Let's go to the pay screen. All right, so the pay screen is pretty big. Pay type, you have three choices. I absolutely recommend and really require that you don't change this, meaning that if you set up the job to be salary and you now want to make it hourly, go back to the payroll job master record and set up an hourly job, please, and use it. Don't mix and match. We've had a couple clients mix and match and like override the type here from what comes in from the payroll job. And it's caused some reporting confusion and some just general confusion. And so, they're kind of comparing then. We store, as an example, simple example, is in this field right here. We store the hourly rate for the hour type jobs and the salary, the annual salary, generally speaking, for the salary job. So if I had the same job code, in which I've kind of done an audible on some and not others, and I ran a report, and I actually tried to get some grand total going, you would understand that I'm now literally compressing apples and oranges and getting, I don't even know what I'm getting. So it's really important that we don't muddy the waters and allow them to override that pay type. The system does allow it, but it just causes analytics that just don't make any sense. So I would highly recommend that. If they have this job, they say, well, this job sometimes when Mary does that job, it's salary, and when Peter does that job, it's hourly. And I'm going, okay, fine. That's fine. What do you call the job? Well, I call it, bus attendant. Okay, fine. Can we have bus attend and then maybe bus attend HR for hourly?
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, come on. Can we just have two different rows on the payroll job master, one salary, one hourly? Can we please? And so, and when I talk to them like that, they go, okay, of course they can. They just were kind of not, how people kind of get stuck,
Right.
So our job is to unstuck them, in some sense. Okay, so the employment type is a field that isn't used for any algorithms. It's mainly just used for reporting purposes. I don't remember or recall anything that could be done based on full-time and part-time. And that's not the same as that full-time equivalent. The full-time equivalent field on the earlier tab is algorithmically used if there's a setup checked which says adjust pay rate by full-time equivalent in the payroll setup table. So you have the option of whether you want the full-time equivalent to be in the math or not in the math, if you will. Most people nowadays, I would argue almost universally, seem to go ahead and run it in the math. And so if the person's a 0.8 and the salary is whatever, then the system, when it computes the pay period amount, it's in essence taking this pay rate, which is an annual amount, times 0.8, divided by the number of pay cycles, which I'm going to explain where that's coming from in a second, to come up with the pay period amount. So that's nice because the pay rate now becomes kind of at a par 1.0. I can compare it to some degree. I can compare apples and oranges. Furthermore, though, the contract limit does get decreased because if I'm paying somebody, let's say 72,000 is their par, but they're a 0.8. Well, obviously their contract really isn't 72,000. It's 72,000 times 0.8. So the contract limit would go ahead and have a smaller number. So that's important, too, for that contract limit calculation we talked about earlier. But it's nice to have the pay rate be the full amount. Now, one thing they're not using in this example is they're not using a pay schedule effective date, grade, and step. So they're just putting that number in there. And so the only way it's going to get automatically increased during the roll is they have the option of going ahead and adding either a flat amount or a % increase. So that's okay. I mean, if they say, look, on average, I want to bring everybody up 1.6%, then that's fine. The system can do that. But what most people are doing in most of our districts around the country is that they're using grades and steps. And so they would have in here a pay schedule code, a grade code, which generally indicates whether they are a BA or an MA or, whatever, kind of what their degree is, and then what step they're on. And then once they go to the next year, then the district decides whether they're going to increase the step or not, or leave it flat, which still may cause an increase in salary. And that's how the system recomputes this value. and so forth. Seem like they're not doing that in this particular district, Perkins. I don't know if they're doing it in any of the Ohio districts. I'm sure they're not doing it at Treco. That I'm 100% sure. But I'm not sure at River Valley or wherever, are they using a grade step system. I thought Ohio did use grades and steps in a lot of the districts, so I'm kind of surprised they're not using it. Are you familiar with anybody using it? Because I can switch to their company if you want me to, but I just don't know. Okay, so forgetting that for a second, just pretend all that stuff's there. The pay rate gets established. Then we have this thing called additional pay. So if I click on this button here, it'll bring me into a read-only place. I can't do anything here. But what I can do, to put additional pay in, and I'll define additional pay in a second, is I have to click this button. So there's a difference between clicking the flow field versus entering the additional pay. Additional pay, let's just take an example. So right now the person's $3,018. Remember, I am in test, although I don't know why test is green. It should be red, but I hope this is really test. Additional pay pops up. You can create a lookup table. And again, they haven't done it, but let's just go ahead and put a record in here because I think at this point it would make sense. So I'll call it department head. So in our district, we pay department heads an additional $3,000 per year. Okay, let's just pretend that's the case. So if I were to okay that into here, the system would go ahead and bring in 3,000. I could say, well, this person's special department head, and we're going to get in a little bit more, or I can just accept that. When I hit the OK button, the system will pop up a screen saying that changes to this require that the pay period amount and contract limit be recomputed. Do you want to proceed? If you don't, it actually will completely remove what you just did. So you have to you have to say yes if you want it to take effect and stick. So when I do this, 3018, let's just see. So you can see it kind of went up, daily rate went up, the contract limit went up, blah, blah, blah. So it's pretty straightforward. The additional pay here, I can click on here and see that. Additional pay is used by districts all over the country. I've seen it being used in almost tons of places. We just did a ton of it in Maryland. People use it for longevity, department heads, curriculum heads, it's not like the person has another job. They just have their job and maybe something a little extra. They're doing something extra that's not really a job. It's really more part about their job. It's about the fact that they're a little bit higher up. It's a way to distinguish them, I guess, among their peers.
So it's not like coaching?
No, it's definitely not. You would never see coaching being done through additional pay ever, because coaching is going to always go to a different account string. And so that's going to govern it. If this additional compensation is going to go to where they're going to go to in the GL for their default job, then additional pay starts to smell correct. As soon as you tell me it's additional account, a different account string, which coaching is always additional, it's in the athletics area, right, then it's absolutely not that. Besides that, generally speaking, they don't pay them that amount throughout the whole year of coaching. They pay in the beginning of the season and the end of the season, and if they didn't win any games, they didn't do a deduction. I'm just teasing about that. But the point is that they generally pay them, kind of like twice. And so coaching is interesting because I think if their policy is I pay you half, here and half there kind of thing, you can actually get the system to sort of do that kind of automatically. And the way you can do that is different ways. But one way is just set up a salary job. You would set up the pay rate. Let's say they're paying them $6,000. So you say the pay rate is $6,000. You manually go over to the pay period amount and put $3,000 in, right? So every time it runs, it's going to pay them $3,000. Now, by the way, this coaching, maybe you have a different payroll job for coaching, fall sports versus spring sports, right? So you might have a coach SP and a coach FL or something. I'm just making that up. So that you're kind of in this pay run, you're wanting to pay the first payment to your fall coaches, right? And you're paying them half of their contract, and hopefully half works out. If it's not half, then maybe we can do it a little bit differently. But let's just say that works. So then what you can do is you can put all these on and block them initially. Okay, this is where block becomes advantageous. They're They're salary jobs. They're going to drop it automatically, but I can block them, right? And then I have a periodic activity that I can run to mass unblock all my fall coaches, if you will, that have a certain date range. Obviously, I don't want to unblock the ones from last year, but the ones for this year, based on that date range, I can go ahead and do that. And another option would be you could go ahead and have a very small date range. Like this date range is just like the check you want it to be on. The downside with that one is that you're going to have to go back to this job and do something to get it to be the second half. So that one's kind of a little bit more cumbersome. So I like the idea of sort of setting it up with a start date and end date that basically covers the whole season, then blocking it maybe initially, then using the mass unblock to unblock it. It processes beautifully for the 12 or 15 or 30 coaches you have. Then you go ahead and just, once that payroll's processed, reblock it back up, and then go ahead and run it one more time, unblock, then block it back, and something like that. I'm just kind of throwing that out at you.
So if you have one coach that didn't hand in like uniforms or something, you can just go in and block that one and pay the rest until he gets his stuff handed.
Sure, you can handle that in many ways. You can, at that point, once you run the mass unblock, you could either in that filter exclude him by his employee number, or you can let it get unblocked and just go to his card and block him right back up.
Okay.
And and then again, as long as you block everybody else up, then when he does turn his uniforms in, you can just simply unblock him, and he'll just run through the next time. And you could also use your contract limit functionality, because then you could also put in the contract limit 6,000. You have 3,000 on the 2 pay period amounts, and so then it can stay on. It can stay even unblocked because it's going to stop on its own because of the contract limiting, if you will. And that's kind of the way I think it works if you have sort of like 2 payments in which, you want to pay not 50%, but maybe 40% up front, and the other payment is the 60%.
Mm-hmm.
Then what you can do is just sort of maybe trick the system that way to sort of use the contract limiting to sort of help you there. I think that's, in my way of thinking, I don't know if that's going to work. It'd probably be better if it was 60 and then 40. Yeah. Because remember, the pay period amounts, it's not going to pay more than the pay period amount, and it certainly won't pay more than the contract. But again, remember, you still have to have the earnings code back up on this general tab connected to something that has that contract limit. And what I would do is you can't use earn comp sal again. I think I said to you when we talked about payroll controls in the previous training session that when the system is really calculating payroll, it's kind of using for the salary jobs, the reason they pop in is it's actually going to the payroll controls. It gets to earn comp sal, and it says, do I have any unblocked jobs that are earn comp sal? And it finds it. If it finds 2 of them, it says, I don't know which one to use. I'm confused, and basically errors out, right? So, you learn pretty quickly that if we're going to have more than one salary job, I have to have another earnings code. Now, remember, the earnings code defaults from the payroll job. So simply set up something called earn coach, or maybe, again, earn coach fall, earn coach spring, put the contract limit on it, and then it flows in beautifully, and you don't have this problem. So just be careful of your earnings code. You can't just keep using earn comp sal over and over and over again.
Okay.
Think about it for the mainstream parts of salaries, but not for salaried things that are kind of discretionary things that people are optionally doing, like coaching is a perfect example. So I just want to make that point. All right, so additional pay we talked about, pay period amount. You can override this. Again, buyers beware. I mean, the change log will record it, but you can't override that. Daily rate, you cannot. The daily rate's computed, so you can never touch that. Contract limits, you can override. Not a problem. Docked pay. So if you do process leave without pay, and the system automatically computes it as a docked pay, it will mark a record or a checkbox to say that was a docked pay amount. And what that does is it's kind of another way to be taking away their contract amount, if you will, because the things that give you the balance, basically the contract balance, is normally getting paid, right? I mean, if I have a contract for $30,000, I got to pay $10,000. I have $60,000 in my contract. But if I took a day without pay, I'm going to lose $407.77, that daily rate. So what it's doing is it's going to further remove that amount, and then you'll see the contract balance being kind of ended earlier, if it makes any sense to you. And so that all kind of works out because on that time they got docked pay, they got paid less. And so really what we're kind of doing is sort of saying, well, you know what, you got paid less, but we, from a contract perspective, are going to get full credit for it. And we're just divvying it up now. We're showing you how much is coming from amount that we paid in cash to you versus how much you kind of took, extra leave to sort of fund, if that makes any sense. So that's kind of why the contract balance removes stock pay. Retro to be processed. So I think that's probably a little bit beyond today's scope, but I'll just allude to it, is that we have a retro worksheet that you can run for 1 employee or 100 employees or whatever, where the system can go through and it's kind of hard to do without a grade and step system. I think you're going to have to sort of manually just enter numbers in. But basically, let's just say for hook or crook, the system figures out that these people deserve retros. What happens is when you process the retro worksheet and post it, what it really does is it updates these 2 fields here. You can't touch these 2 fields. It has to be updated by this process. And basically, the retro to be processed gets checked, and the last retro pay is updated. It'll say $1,400 or whatever. Then during the time that you're processing payroll, the system will insert an additional earnings line for that, for this job. It will, in parentheses on the paycheck description, put in parentheses retro, so they see it on their paycheck. It'll tax it, do all that normal stuff. When it processes it in post, it will uncheck the retro to be processed. It'll keep the last retro amount, so you kind of see the last one. That's why we say last. If you do another one, it gets overridden now. But hopefully, it's pretty unusual you'd have 2 retro pays on the same year for the same contract. Quite honestly, we've never seen it. So we kind of use the word last because, well, in that case it happened, we would have we at least would be correct. The retro paid gets totaled right there. You can drill it and so forth. If it's an hourly job, you would see also the hours there besides the dollars. And if it's a per diem job, you would see the per diem units. Units are like hours. The only difference is that it's just a slower quantities. I mean, instead of having, 80 hours, it's a per diem of 5. From the system's perspective, it kind of sees it as paid hours, but we kind of distinguish it and track it and understand it better than the system out of the box did, if you will. These next fields, again, kind of gets back to that substitute fields above, in the sense they're part of a whole bunch of functionality that has been built that I don't fully understand as well. So I think we have to have some additional training on that. Christina's actually on the phone. She's our resident expert on this area, but I'm not sure she's expert in our version of this system, more in the older Sunpack system. Christina, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm learning. I've been playing around with it today. So.
All right. Well, you'll need to bone up on this part because you're an expert in this area, and I know I'm not, and so it's an area. And what we're trying to drive to, Brenda, is automatic overtime and comp time calculation abilities in the system. Mm-hmm. So it's looking at raw hours, and it's going through based on a bunch of rules, and these are some of the rules that the system is, using to go ahead and determine whether that person gets paid overtime or whether that additional overtime gets moved into a comp bucket and then used and available for comp time. So I'm not an expert on how to set that system up and use it. So hopefully Christina will become one and can do a training in the future for all of us.
Okay.
So on what we're doing right now, you would not have to go in here if it's a regular employee on contract and they have no exceptions. But if they're going to have a dock pay, then you'd have to go in when you're doing payroll and put in a dock day, or maybe sometime if they have overtime, like a custodian worked overtime, somehow you might be able to put they worked 8 hours overtime and it would process it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Well, right now, today, you put in the job. Let's say it's, as you say, it's it's like a maintenance worker. So you put the person in the time journal and you put in their employee number. It defaults to their default job, which is maintenance worker. Let's just say. Okay. And the earnings code will say earned regular, and you'll go in there and say, okay, X amount of hours of earned regular. You have a little bit of overtime. You just go down below one quick line. You hit F8, F8, F8. When it gets to the earnings code, instead of being earned reg, it's going to be earned. I think it's earned over. Yeah, earned over for overtime. When you click that, the rate will change. So it dynamically changes the rate. So instead of $10 an hour, it'll say 15. You put in 6 hours. You see on the test report, you process them, and everybody seems happy. So some people aren't happy because the data is coming in from large front-end time collection systems systems that don't have any overtime rule calculations built in. So they don't know the overtime rules. They just kind of are collecting raw hours, and it's all coming in, and it's like thousands of entries. Sometimes these districts are very large, and then somebody says, well, you know what? I don't want to have to go and analyze all this. Can the computer do that for me? And so that's when all this stuff starts to make sense.
Okay.
So right now, the way we've always rolled, if you will, before this was introduced, in North Carolina, we had some very large districts. I mean, we're talking humongous. And so for them, they can't deal with this data at a data entry level. It has to be all automated, if you will. But in the world that we normally have worked in, people pretty much have it already figured out whether it's regular or overtime as they're data entering, and it's just a data entry process, which we're going to train you on as part of this training that we're doing. But so Christina was part of sort of working on that area on the older AS400 system, and Kevin did a lot of the programming. And so Kevin's still with us and still programming now on the K-12 side. And so he's been working on this area quite a bit. And I just don't know. I mean, I think it's fully operational. I just don't know how to use it. I don't know how to set the system up to use it. I know there are people in our company that know. I'm just not that expert, so I don't want to hold myself out as being an expert. One thing I can talk to is those last two fields, though, the salary payroll job number. The salary payroll job number is we're starting to get the need and desire to track hours worked for people that are being paid salaries. So we don't really pay them based on the fact that they are keep punching hours X or Y. It's more of an attendance issue. And so to trick our system to be able to kind of do that, this field helps us to do that. So this salary payroll job number would look back up into the jobs for this employee, I'm presuming. Let me see, is it looking up at all? Well, it's not looking up at anything, so I'm not sure what it's because it's probably not, it's told not to do anything on this job. It's really the hourly job that you would look in. So if I went to this person's hourly job and clicked on this field, and again, I'm not sure why it's not showing me. I'm not sure what it's looking for. Filter. It's looking for the dates 8/1 to 8/31. So I guess one of the requirements I just figured out is that I guess it has to be exactly the same as this start date, end date. Let me just confirm that again. So that's, yeah, yeah. So what they're basically saying is that the companion hourly job has to have the exact same date structure as the salary job. But that's all I know at this point. Let's not go beyond that. I do know reporting group. I don't know if reporting group is used here, but reporting group can be used for leave approval and time entry approval, the approval rules. So basically you can devise a leave approval rule based on a reporting group. So it's a way to sort of pierce down below the employee master record into sort of the job level. So people that have, I guess, the same default jobs, you could have maybe, in the same building, I have 50 teachers in which I want to cluster them into three reporting groups for time entry approval purposes, maybe by floor, something the system wouldn't know otherwise. So this is another way to sort of group people's jobs into different clusters for approval routing, if you will, for leave and time entry. So that's where that is. And I think it might have some other uses as well. I'm just not sure. I'm sorry to be a little vague, but some of the stuff is very new to me. Just kind of just hot off the press. Okay, so that's pay, allocation we looked at already, and then other. So other is pretty straightforward. We have this retirement category code. We talked about that previously when we talked about the payroll job setup, and we talked about STRS earnings versus SCRS earnings, and that flows from the payroll job pretty much automatically and should be good to go. But if, as an example, you blanked it out here for whatever reason, and remember, as I told you earlier, when you change that date, it says, do you want to bring in the data from the setup record? If you were to say yes, then it would be brought back in again. If you said no, it would not. The retirement system position code, I don't know if we use in Ohio, so I'm not sure what that's used for. I think that's more in other states. Expected months, this person is working 9 months, which is kind of surprising for me. Hours per day, 7. Days per year, hours per year. Yeah, I don't really get 9. Should be 10, I would think. HR system position number, I'm not really sure what that is. I don't know where that got added. I think that's unrelated to our position control system. I guess if the company has a completely separate HR system, what is the position number for this job, for this employee? It's not related to our position control system. I do know that. Okay, so other options here, obviously, some of the stuff we've already talked about. I'm just kind of going through actions here. Salary calculator, I have not heard many people using that lately. By the way, there's the cancel retro pay, by the way. So if you process a retro pay worksheet and you post it and you go, oh, crap, what the hell were we thinking? You can come in here. Now, you got to do it by employee, by the way. And if you did it for 3,000 employees, heaven help you. You'd probably call us up and we'll write a SQL script for you. But anyway, you can cancel this right now and it'll just cancel it. And of course, it has to be there to be able to cancel. Make job primary, navigate. I'm just trying to think of anything other. So here are the ledger entries. Yeah, this is the ledger entries that have been processed. So you can see these are actually coming from the payrolls. These are actually the different paychecks. I'm not sure where the check number is. It's probably here somewhere on the screen. Should be somewhere. It's just God knows where. It's probably a hidden column. Yeah, some of these columns are just hidden. Yep, there it is right there. Check number. Yeah, there's a bunch of other fields that are on the screen. Okay, so we got that. But the action is salary calculator. I have to remind myself how this works. Start date, end date, full year, from start date. Yeah, I think the design here is related to the example I was saying earlier where people start mid-year. And the system you're trying to go through, and it's not that they are leaving early, they're starting late. And the system then goes through and you say, well, what was their actual start date? 2/1/15, end date 8/30. I don't know where it's coming up with this information. So that means that's only 79 days. That's their annual salary normally, rate per day, contract limit, pay period amount. I'm not sure if I click this what will happen, so I'm not going to click it. But it's an area I would advise to play with and just see what it does and see if it needs improvement. It's an area that hasn't been touched in a long time. And so I'm not sure. I mean, one of the things I'm surprised it doesn't do is the customized calendar. See, there's the customized calendar. I guess the idea here is you would just click on this button, and you would just take them out. So it makes it convenient, but it doesn't just do it for you. You know what I mean? So I think it may do it for you automatically. I just don't remember. Quite honestly, it's been a long time, so it's something to look at. That might be helpful. This is for if you use our position control system, which I don't think we need to get into that right now. So, so that's the job. I think I covered the job pretty well. Some of these same options exist here and so forth. Navigate. Now, how to roll jobs, we'll go into, I think, a later date. I don't think we'll get to that today, maybe not even tomorrow. So we'll kind of just remind me that we need to get in and show you how to roll jobs. That's something you definitely want to know about for sure. Okay, so we've done the jobs, the rates, the tax auth info, the other auth info, the pay distribution, the pay controls, extended fields. We didn't go through a ton of this navigation of all the HR stuff, which is all these areas here. And I'm really not going to get into that heavily right now. Probably becomes a little bit more interesting when we start doing maybe the self-service system. But right now it's not really part of payroll per se. There's nothing in here that I can think of that is part of a payroll. Let's see here. I'm trying to think of anything else that you might want to look at while we're here. The job history. So you do have the ability to roll jobs off. So after, let's say, 4 or 5 years, you can say, let's take all the jobs from the 5 years ago and move it to the history. So you can do that, and then that's where it would show up. So there's a periodic activity to do that if you want to. Dimensions, yeah. So, all right, so I'm trying to think. I think we're good. I think we can go ahead and start learning how to process some payroll. That would help, wouldn't it? So, again, we just covered employees. I think we went through employee view and job allocations before. I can't remember if job allocations is not, I don't think it was on this particular company. But anyway, so that's that. Is there anything you want to go in this area before we process payroll? Brenda, you there? Brenda? Anybody there?
I'm
Yeah,
here.
I'm here.
but it's my main student there. Brenda, you there? Maybe I'll wait. Brenda? If you can hear me, raise your hand. Whoops, is that you?
That was me, Roxanne. Sorry. I didn't mute myself. Muting
That's
myself
okay.
now.
Brenda? Earth to Brenda. Let me see if she's sending me emails or something. Maybe she's going, hey, my mic just... No. Brenda? Can you hear me? Yeah, I'm not sure what happened to her. Because actually I click on it, it says not watching the presentation. Wonder if they lost internet connectivity. What do you think we should do, Bill? You still recording? You may want to pause your recording.
All right, hold on.
Just because we're...
Back up.
It just gives me a red dot. It just says, people who are recording. Bill